some information that came out. I think it might have been announced on Friday. We didn't cover off on it yesterday, at least anyway. And this is the new, it's not necessarily a new syllabus, but a new way of teaching in schools mathematics as instructed by Mr. Luxon, our hairless leader. And we thought we need to get an expert in to talk to us about this. So he is the principal's representative from Te Tai Tokoro. He's also a principal with some 40 plus years experience. He has the best first name in the world. It is Pat Newman joining us tonight. Pat, good evening to you, sir.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
How can you say that without saying it? Kia ora, kia ora.
Yeah. I know. Honestly, I'm very much looking forward because it shows the uttermost ridiculous thing you could possibly. It's like if you're going. It's like you might as well put no Māori symbolism on this invitation to the Māori New Year. It's just bizarre. Utterly
We
bizarre.
could refer to him as Paulie Goldie-Smith.
Right. Let's have a look at this. You've put out a press release today. And let me just read the first paragraph of your press release. We want to talk about structured mathematics and this government's insistence not just to implement it, but to implement it 12 months faster than they were going to implement it last time. The TTPA, Te Tai Tokoro Principals Association, has put out a press release, and it says this in the first paragraph. Aotearoa's choir boy of crisis, Christopher Crisis Luxon, strikes again. As always, never let the evidence get in the way of a good story. He misuses the suspect data gathered in mid-2022 on math achievement in New Zealand schools to authorise the dogmatic one solution works for all mandating of pedagogy in New Zealand education. So we were trying to read between the lines what you're actually trying to say there. We were a bit unclear about that, Pat. But I thought what we'd do to start the whole thing off with.
You must be a politician if you're unclear about it.
This is actually from RNZ. It's both Christopher Luxon and Chris Hipkins, 60 seconds each, talking about this issue, and then we'll get into it. Let's have a listen to what they had to say. If we actually had to listen to what they had to say, would be good, I guess. Just talk amongst yourselves. Nothing to see here.
Any minute now.
The assessment moved at the end of last year to be in year, looking at year 8 versus a multi-year band. What we're focused on is making sure we fix the problem, and whether it's 45% or whether it's 22%, we've got a problem in maths. And when we can actually cut it year by year, and we see 3 out of our 5 kids are actually a year or more behind, 4 out of 5 are actually not at the standard they need to be to take on high school. That's a big problem. That's why we've moved very fast.
For consistency purposes, wouldn't it be better to use the assessment data that goes with the correct curriculum?
I would just say to you, outside of this place, in New Zealand, if you're a parent, you want to know that your kids are actually where they need to be at the standard they need to be at going into high school. And when 4 out of 5 of our kids in year 8 are not at the math standard, that's a big problem. And we can debate and discuss that all day long if you want to, inside baseball process conversations, or we actually go out there and we fix it for New Zealanders, and that's what we're doing.
Are schools going to have to defer their art and music curriculums in order to prioritise maths?
We've made it very clear there's must-do stuff and there's nice-to-do stuff, and we want everything focused on the must-do. And at the moment, that means teaching our kids to read and teaching them to do mathematics. And if everything else has to be delayed as a consequence of that, so be it.
We do know that there is a gap here around between years 4 and 8. Kids seem to lose progress in areas like maths and literacy during that time. But we've got really good objective data that goes back over a longer period so that we can benchmark and we can compare results from year to year. The data they're using now doesn't have any historical comparators. We can't benchmark that against anything because it's literally data that's been made up from assessing kids against a standard that they haven't been taught.
The Prime Minister said that he doesn't care if other curriculums, like in art or music, are delayed in favour of maths. Do you think there's anything to be concerned about there in terms of neglecting other subjects?
Well, the government talks about wanting to follow evidence. If you're following evidence in education, all the evidence is pretty clear. If kids are learning from a balanced curriculum, then they're more likely to succeed than if you're teaching them a very narrow curriculum. Other countries around the world who have tried to narrow down the curriculum, policies like No Child Left Behind in the US are really good examples of this. You actually see overall student achievement going backwards in the areas that you're trying to improve because you narrow down the focus so much. If we want our kids' educational achievement to improve, they have to be learning from a balanced curriculum.
So there you go. Thanks to RNZ for that. How about no even questions, Pat? Your response to what you've just heard.
Well, a couple of things. One, first, for the first time, Chris Hipkins actually spoke 100% truth. I couldn't believe it. Not that, I mean, it says he tells lies, but the whole lot of it was very valid. The other point that I'd like to make is that I can't understand how a person who has no understanding of education is making educational decisions. I really just can't. A man that can stand up there and say arts, music, etc., social studies, science are not important is beyond me, absolutely beyond me. And I think what's very unfair is that he is marginalising and scaring parents. And this is the problem we've had. This government has marginalised and scared parents about the lack of achievement and the lack of that. Can I jump to the chase straight away and say to you, the Year 8 kids he's talking about, they started learning mathematics under the national government's last great experiment called National Standards.
Yeah.
And at that time, the professionals like myself got up and said, if you go down this track, you'll have problems. They didn't listen. We now have some problems about that Year 8 time. And now they're proposing another thing that's not going to work. It's loony bins time, but it's our kids that these people are playing with. Yeah. What people forget is that data was taken from around about the 2022. Guess what was happening then? In 2022, where were most of the kids? They were in and out of school. They were at home half the time because it was the middle of COVID. I'm not saying that mathematics is where it should be, all right? I'm not saying that, or even language. But what I am saying is we've been screaming for help from all governments, both Labour and National, for years, 30 that I can think of, saying you removed all the support for teaching curriculum and helping teachers know curriculum. It was called the advisory services. Roger Douglas and his mates Preble decided it was better to give fly-by-nighters contracts to come in and do it, to teach teachers how to do it. They removed all the supports. And we've been screaming out and saying, give us back the advisory service. If they turned around now and said, look, we're going to really listen. We know you need help. We know that not every kid is succeeding. Then we, instead of spending I think it's about 80 million now they're talking, and a few other 100 million they're wasted elsewhere. If they said, we'll turn that into giving advisory services so you have people in all curriculum areas in your schools, whenever you need them, following up with you, working in your classroom beside your teachers, showing you how to update, I would have been applauding them. Instead, so he can make a big announcement in front of his National Party meeting on Sunday, he used our children as cannon fodder. He brought up the mathematics thing before anyone was even ready. The ministry didn't even know he was making the announcement, or the ones out in the regions didn't know. But he needed something to look big. And he used our kids. And he talks about how it will be great because every kid will be getting taught the same. Good God, man, has he got no kids? Which kids all learn the same? What is the difference between some of our kids who may be under trauma, may be under abuse, all those sort of things? What's the difference between kids that are bright and slow? About special needs, about neurodiversity? Is the man bloody well cuckoo? If he is, he shouldn't be running the country.
On that point, well, I was going to share this later on, but he was on breakfast this morning as well, talking about structured mathematics. He goes, it's good because it's a consistent way to do several things, including, this is what he said.
But actually having a consistent way of teaching both maths and reading is important, and it helps all kids that are struggling, and certainly kids that need to be extended.
So, consistent way of teaching it. I mean, look,
teach by numbers, page 1 to 5 today, page 6 to 10 tomorrow. Yeah. If you miss a page, you are held back. Too bad.
Because surely the way kids learn is all different. I mean, I'm not saying surely, like asking you, we know that. So how can you have a one-size-fits-all teaching model if kids all learn differently?
Look, just on reading alone, we know there are 27 probably more, but at least 27 different ways of teaching reading. And some of the experts actually said in the past, most kids need a bit of all the 27.
Right.
And I have got nothing, for instance, in reading around phonics that's needed for some kids. It's bloody great for some kids and they need it. In fact, all kids need a bit of it.
Mm-hmm.
But to say it's the only way to teach,
Yeah.
we might as well just shove them in front of the computer and let them follow, page 1, as I said, page 2, page 3. It means my profession is not allowed to do what we know. Can you imagine him standing up and saying, we're going to tell the surgeons how to actually take a heart out and put it back into a person? Not just, this is what you'll do and how often, but this is exactly the steps you'll take. What makes him think he's got the mandate to say that?
Hey, Pat, I've got a question for you, right? I understand that no government has serviced your sector well enough all the way through, but something feels different about this to me. We've spoken a few times. Do you feel personally angry about this? Am I reading that right? Is there something different about this?
When I heard this crap this morning, I actually thought about penning my resignation.
Wow.
And that takes a lot. I'm 71. I've been doing the principal's job since 81. I've been teaching my first year 76. I still do it because I can do it and I enjoy it and I'm contributing. But I sat there and I thought, this guy's, sorry, I'm going to say he's a wanker.
Mm.
When we have a situation where the training colleges, the universities training, are shutting down their courses because no one's applying to be a teacher, when we can't get relievers, when most schools, and I'll say most, are having to double up classrooms when people are sick because we can't get relieving teachers, when teachers are walking out of the classrooms, do you think that's the time to pile the shit on us? Instead, you should be sitting there listening to those that know what they're talking about instead of their pet friends, putting the decent resourcing in, and I told you the resourcing we needed, and actually making my profession once again a profession that the young, good, keen people coming out of universities and coming out of schools want to be. And it's an indictment on this government. It's an indictment on Chris's government that we are in this situation.
Yeah. I mean, the question is often asked, and I don't know if it's a fair question or not, but Labor were there for 6 years. You talked about national standards, and I think that's fair to point to that about the 15-year-olds and that under national standards, but Labor was there for 6 years. They could have changed, tweaked, done something else. They chose not to. So they do bear some responsibility for this as well?
I've just said that.
Yeah.
They made they started off really well, and they did something that I was really excited with. They went right around the country and they had meetings with parents, with professionals, and with everybody. And they asked, what did they want for education? I don't remember that. And what came out of that from the parents strongly was the opposite of what this guy in Wellington is now saying. Parents said, yes, we want the kids to learn to read and to write, but we want the whole rounded child.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this wanker down there just said it doesn't matter.
Yeah, there's a whole lot to be concerned with here. And some of it, like, when I heard that Luxon was using Singapore as an example, coincidentally, I was catching up with a mate of mine that I haven't seen for ages because he's been overseas, and his wife, who has come here from Singapore, has experience in Singapore education, and she said it is crushing. The expectations that they place on their children there for it's not. It's for excellence. It's whoever's at the top, no matter how you get there. She talks about kids that go into school before 8 in the morning. They get out. They go straight into hours of tutoring afterwards because they have to be at the top of the achievement.
They go home and do 2 or 3 hours of private tuition, getting paid for, so that they, He doesn't tell you that.
No.
He doesn't.
No,
He quotes that.
he
He quotes.
expects us to not know these things.
Yeah, he quotes. I've forgotten it. God, I must be getting senile a little bit. He quotes the country over in Europe, starts with F, about how that is a marvelous country on education and that. Well, part of it is a bit dogmatic, but that country he's talking about has for 40 years had an agreement amongst all the political parties on the direction of education.
Right.
We as a profession have asked and asked and asked, can you as political parties not sit down, why can't you sit down with us, with the parents, come up with a broad perspective so that we don't have what's happened for all of my career. Every 2.5 years we get a new master. They call them the minister or her. They come along with their pet theories. And every 2.5 years, they say, stop what you are doing in education. I've got a better idea. I don't know where the hell I get it from, usually over the teacups. I've got a better idea. Do this. Then in 2.5 years, someone else comes along. And then someone else. And they wonder, when we're under-resourced and they're doing that, why we have a crisis in education. It's not the teachers at fault. It's the bloody politicians.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about all politicians, the party system. They need to sit down and say, our kids, our hospitals, by the way, should be done the same way, are too important. And we need to have a direction that we all agree on. It doesn't have to be everything, but the main thrust. And let us get on with the job and resources to do the job. Instead of rubbishing us, threatening us. He's now threatening, because I don't know if you picked up the other one, and they're going to tell Aero, when we're just getting to work with Aero in a nice, productive, positive way to help kids. But now they're going to direct them to become the Gestapo police again. And if we aren't coming up to standards, they'll send in the minions to make us. And if we still don't, we'll be fired. Well, the man's again on the cuckoo land because there's no one to replace us. Sorry, I am, as you picked up, fairly... Are you allowed to say pissed off here?
You can say fucked off, you can say pissed off, you can say whatever you want, Pat. Up to you.
There's not even any detention. We haven't rolled that out.
No lines. Won't give you any lines. Won't wash your mouth out with soap. I've got a question though, because I went to teacher training college in Auckland, Epsom there, and I think I remember in the late 1990s there being a change to what was considered a core curriculum subject. And for some reason, I have a memory that says dance and drama became kind of a core curriculum subject. It's not the case anymore, is it? What would be considered the core curriculum subjects? And why I'm asking that is when he talks about the nice to haves, art and music, are they technically not core curriculum subjects anymore?
No,
is that how?
Again, oh no, I've got to be careful what I say. We have a curriculum, and all subjects are involved, including art, music, drama, science, social studies are a crucial one, but most of them, a lot of them are not being taught now. And why are they not being taught? They're not being taught because we haven't got that advisory service to go around and teach people how to teach social studies, how to do the arts and music. The model that they have to help is that they let contracts, but the contracts are only let by the ministry depending on what is the whim of the current minister. So the current minister at the moment has got a whim on reading, for instance. So in theory, they're letting contracts in reading. I don't think we've had any contracts in reading in a major way for years. So a lot of teachers don't know how to teach those subjects anymore. And that's why I'm saying, instead of this rubbish, can you imagine if we had highly skilled practitioners throughout the country in the arts and science and reading and maths, able to go into schools, spend time in the classrooms, going over things with the teachers, refreshing the kids, all that sort of thing, what would happen? Yet they go down this line, which is do as you're told. We know better because we ran Air New Zealand and because we're now supposedly in Parliament. We know better than you. Do as you're told. Well, maybe they couldn't do as they're told because their behaviour really does need something done about it.
as you say, the aforementioned press release, the last line, what we have instead is an approach more akin to, quote, I'm the chairman of the board, although I know nothing about education, just do as you're told, as you finish that press release. I have a question for you. I currently have an 18-year-old who is in her first year of teacher training. She's at university in Otago, and she's studying to be a teacher. What advice have you got for her?
My advice is to study pedagogy. My advice is to study really strongly how children learn. My advice is to become a teacher. And my advice is to stand up for what you believe and what you've learned. I probably may have portrayed a different thing, but as I said, I've been teaching since 76. I could retire. I could have retired a couple of years ago, but it's still the best job in the world. When you walk into a school and the kids are there and you're talking and you're relating to them, and they're all jokes aside, coming up, giving you hugs, making sure you know that you're welcome, you get revitalized. You can't get that sitting in Parliament pontificating about things you don't know but pretending you do. You can't get that in many jobs. So I would say to your 18-year-old, it's one of the toughest jobs out there. It's not one of the highest paid, but by God, there's reward with it. But just don't let the pricks take that away from you.
Chewie, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, look, I mentioned this before we went live on the show. A friend of mine who's a secondary teacher and has been for a couple of years now, who understands neurodiverse students, who is extremely passionate about what she does. She's been umming and ahhing about it for a few months, but this was the final nail in the coffin for her. She handed in her notice. She signed up. I think she's heading to Brisbane. They're certainly happy to take our teachers. So I think this is really, really going to cost us. And I think that the thing that you identified, that you get a government that wants to make changes to education on a 4-year timescale, maybe an 8-year timescale if we're lucky. Nobody is sitting there and going, what's our 20-year timescale from when they start to when they finish? What are we wanting to crank out here? Like they talk about maths and they've got to hit these standards, and everybody's got to learn the
yeah, but whose standards and where have they got the standard? But no one's actually questioned where they got these standards from.
I mean, I look at my own experience as a neurodiverse student who hated maths. It was deeply unpleasant. It didn't click for me at all. And it took a teacher going way off book to get me engaged in that and to get me there. Now, that's not learning to the same standard. She found the standard that worked for me to get me somewhere. It wasn't how everybody else was learning. I really take umbrage with him basically putting a value on what these kids are learning.
Yeah.
And it's maths is up here, high value. High value is maths. Arts, who the fuck needs that? Can't run a business on arts. It's just, and to come from someone whose kids weren't in the New Zealand education system. They learned overseas. His direct input into this is so fucking minimal to be offensive. And at the time when they're talking about charter schools and they won't have to follow all of these rules.
By the way, they
just
don't. They
seems
don't.
so
The charter
focused.
schools don't have to follow the curriculum. They don't even have to have people that are teachers.
Which is completely hypocrisy, because if they're saying this, we've done this before, Pat, they're like going, we've got the best way forward. This is the best way forward. This is going to be best for the children. Oh, you guys don't have to do this. You can do whatever you want. You know, it's like, hang on, you've either got the best way and they should be doing it, or you don't have the best way and you should shut up about it.
Yeah, but you've forgotten one thing.
Yep.
This is not based on educational pedagogy. This is based on a political ideology. The decision, the whole lot of this is based on a political ideology. You look what they are aiming for. They are aiming for not the neurodiverse. Yet the neurodiverse to me are the ones that make exit society exciting. They're not aiming for that. They're aiming for, it's a bit like what you call the, I'm being very rude here, but the St. Cuthbert sort of syndrome where you've got 4 or 5 boys and girls, rather elite schools in Auckland, and they tend to socialise a lot together, they tend to intermarry together, and they tend to keep all the millions of the families all within the tight circle. And I think this is very much around identifying who are the cannon fodder, and who's going to make the money. And and so we have charter schools and all the rest of it. But, at one day we'll wake up and the mess will be still there. I guarantee you, if we carry on down this track, we will have children reading worse, even though we're getting good results at the moment. Eventually we'll have children reading worse, and we'll have children doing mathematics worse.
Hey Pat, it's been fantastic to talk to you. We've got a few chats and stuff that are in there, but they're more about the subject matter. So we'll let you go. There is one I want to send to you though. It's from Raywin. Raywin says, "You're an awesome principal, Pat. My daughter and 3 Moka went to Hora Primary. Great, straight talking person." So that's just to you from Raywin in the chat right now. And other than that, you can come back anytime. When I get to ask one question, you talk for 25 minutes. It makes my job super easy, Pat.
Yeah, some people call me a kahawahanui. Do you know what that is? It's called a big mouth.
Okay. Yeah. But it's been brilliant. And look, this is an important conversation. And the good thing about the little community we've got here is they will share this left, right, and centre, and these words will go out. So thank you for sharing them.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. You take
Thanks,
care,
Pat.
both of you.
All the best.
Arahanui.
Thanks, Pat.
Okay. Just that idea of cannon fodder. The idea, like as we were talking, I was going, we've talked about this before too. Because what they're doing is they're preparing the clones to work in the factories, whilst the elites, the other people, get to own the factories. And that's the system that they're setting up. It's a class system, isn't it? It's like you guys need to know how to do your ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and that's it, because that's all that needs to happen when you're screwing on caps to bottles in the factory that my son-in-law owns. That's how it feels.
Like I said this before when we were talking about their changes to the curriculum and what they wanted to achieve. They are teaching kids for a world that doesn't exist. You talk, and I see a comment echoing this in the chat as well. They talk about arts not being important. So, schools can just put that on the back burner. We've got to get it in maths. Creatives are hugely important. They're the designers. They're the writers.
Yep.
They're the actors. Not everyone is going to fit in the same box. And this is something that the educational sector has been saying since the 80s, when we started to move away from learning by rote. Is that like, oh, fuck, there's a whole bunch of kids that learn differently. Yeah. It used to be like the kids that would pick up learning by rote and hitting those achievement check marks, they would go all the way through school. Where kids like me that didn't fit in that book would go to a fucking trade school and learn how to be a grease monkey or join the army or something. That's the world that they're trying to think of. Now, Luxon's insulated from that. He's never had to deal with it. His kids haven't gone through the New Zealand education system. They all were educated overseas in North America. So it's the disengagement that is striking me with this. It is so very clearly not what educators want. It's not what they've been feeding back. It's not taking in not only the last, say, 4 years as a reason why there might be a bit of a dip in things, because it's something that we've never had to deal with. But it's not even taking into account the last time they were at the wheel. It is full steam ahead. Damn the torpedoes. Yes, it's ideological. And if you don't want to fit in that box, well, we're opening a range of charter schools. Hope your parents have got their checkbooks out.
Yeah.
Because the government's got their checkbooks out. They're going to pour money into charter schools. And absolutely leave our mainstream schools, our state schools, gold fishing on a hot pavement
Yeah.
rather than help them.